The October wind cut through the pine trees like a blade, carrying with it the scent of snow and the promise of winter's early arrival in northwestern Wyoming. Park Ranger Thomas Mitchell pulled his jacket tighter as he stepped out of his patrol truck, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. At 34, Tom had been with the National Park Service for 8 years, and Yellowstone's remote backcountry had become as familiar to him as his own backyard. But on this particular morning in October 2000, something felt different, an unease that he couldn't quite shake. The radio crackled to life on his shoulder. "Base to Mitchell, you copy." "Mitchell here, go ahead, Sarah. Just checking your position. You're heading to the Thorofare section today, right?" Tom glanced at his watch. 7:42 a.m. "Affirmative. Should reach the cabin by noon. I'll radio in every 2 hours as usual." If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Now, let's continue with Tom's journey into the wilderness. The Thorofare region was one of the most isolated areas in the lower 48 states, a vast wilderness where wolves had only recently been reintroduced and grizzly bears still roamed freely. Tom's assignment was routine: check the remote ranger station, assess trail conditions before the winter closure, and document any wildlife activity. It was the kind of solo patrol that veteran rangers handled regularly, but the solitude could be both peaceful and unnerving. As Tom drove deeper into the backcountry, the civilization of park headquarters faded behind him. The narrow dirt road wound through dense stands of lodgepole pine, their trunks standing like silent sentinels in the early morning light. He passed the blackened remains of trees from the great fires of 1988, where new growth was already beginning to reclaim the forest floor. The landscape told stories of destruction and renewal, cycles that had played out for thousands of years before the first ranger had ever set foot in these mountains. His radio check at 9:30 a.m. went smoothly. Sarah's voice came through clearly, asking about road conditions and wildlife sightings. Tom reported seeing fresh elk tracks and what appeared to be grizzly sign near Yellowstone Lake, routine observations that would be logged in the daily report. The conversation was brief and professional, the kind of exchange that happened dozens of times each day across the park's vast expanse. By 11:45 a.m., Tom had reached the remote ranger station, a small log cabin nestled in a grove of aspens whose leaves had already turned golden with autumn's touch. He parked his truck and conducted his standard inspection, checking the cabin's security, testing the backup radio equipment, and examining the nearby trails for any hazards or maintenance needs. Everything appeared normal, just as it had during his last visit 3 weeks earlier. The noon radio check should have been routine. Tom keyed his microphone at exactly 12 p.m., following the protocol that had been drilled into every park ranger. "Base, this is Mitchell. Radio check from Thorofare Station." Silence. He tried again, adjusting his radio's frequency and checking the antenna connection. "Base, Mitchell calling. Do you copy?" Still nothing but static. Radio dead zones weren't uncommon in Yellowstone's mountainous terrain, but this location had always maintained clear communication with headquarters. Tom made a note to report the issue and decided to try again during his scheduled 2 p.m. check. About 6 miles from the ranger station, as the road curved around a steep hillside, Tom spotted something that didn't belong. Through a gap in the trees, perhaps 200 yards off the main trail, a flash of color caught his eye, something that looked distinctly man-made in a wilderness where such things were rare. He stopped the truck and grabbed his binoculars, focusing on the distant object. It was fabric, definitely fabric, caught on a dead branch about 15 feet up in a tall pine tree. The material was olive green with patches of brown, colors that looked suspiciously like a Park Service uniform. Tom's stomach tightened as he considered the implications. No ranger had reported any incidents in this area, and the location was far from any established trail where a hiker might have encountered trouble. He marked his GPS coordinates and hiked through the underbrush toward the tree, his boots crunching through the fallen leaves and pine needles. As he got closer, his fears were confirmed. The fabric was indeed from a ranger's shirt, and it showed signs of significant damage, tears that looked like they could have come from bear claws, or perhaps from a violent encounter with the forest itself. But there was something else, something that made Tom's blood run cold. Carved into the bark of the tree, about chest-high, were 3 letters, "Du-U." The carving was fresh, the exposed wood still showing white beneath the dark bark. Someone had been here recently, someone who had taken the time to carve a message into this remote tree. Tom immediately began searching the surrounding area, looking for any other signs of human presence. What he found raised more questions than answers. About 50 yards from the tree, he discovered a small clearing, where the ground showed clear signs of disturbance. The earth had been scraped and moved, as if someone had been digging. Several large rocks had been arranged in what looked like a deliberate pattern, though their purpose remained unclear. Most disturbing of all, Tom found tracks in the soft soil near the clearing, boot prints that were definitely human, but strangely distorted, as if the person wearing them had been moving in an unusual manner. Some of the prints appeared to show drag marks, as if someone had been pulled, or had been pulling something heavy across the ground. As daylight began to fade, Tom made the difficult decision to return to his truck and head back to headquarters. He had no backup, limited daylight remaining, and a growing sense that he was dealing with something far beyond a routine patrol incident. Whatever had happened in this remote corner of Yellowstone, it was something that required a full investigation team and proper equipment. The drive back to park headquarters seemed to take forever, each mile bringing new questions and growing dread. Tom tried his radio every few minutes, but communication remained impossible until he was within 10 miles of the main road. When Sarah's voice finally crackled through the static, the relief in her tone was palpable. "Mitchell, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours. What's your status?" "Sarah, I need to speak to the chief immediately. I found something in the Thorofare section that requires immediate investigation. Evidence of a possible incident involving Park Service personnel." There was a long pause before Sarah responded. "Copy that, Tom. Chief Brennan will be waiting for you at headquarters. Are you injured? Do you require assistance?" "Negative on assistance. I'm unharmed, but we need to get a team out to this location first thing tomorrow morning. And Sarah, run a check on any missing personnel reports from the past few weeks. Check other parks too, not just Yellowstone." Chief David Brennan was waiting in his office when Tom arrived, along with Linda Santos, the park's law enforcement specialist. Both had worked at Yellowstone for over 15 years and had dealt with their share of missing persons cases, wildlife incidents, and the occasional criminal activity that found its way into even the most remote wilderness areas. But as Tom described his discovery, both experienced professionals felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. "The initials DUE," Chief Brennan said, consulting a thick file folder. "We need to check our personnel records going back several years. Linda, can you run a search for any current or former employees with those initials?" Santos was already at her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. DUE. Here we go. David Eugene Waters, former ranger, served at Yellowstone from 1979 to 1983. Last assignment was Thorofare section. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Tom felt his mouth go dry. What happened to him? Chief Brennan opened the file and began reading. David Waters, age 28, reported missing on November 15, 1983. He was conducting a pre-winter survey of the Thorofare region when he failed to return from what was scheduled to be a 3-day patrol. Massive search operation lasted 2 weeks, involved over 100 searchers, including helicopters and dog teams. No trace of Waters or his equipment was ever found. The case was officially closed after 6 months, Santos added, pulling up additional records. Presumed dead due to wildlife encounter or weather-related incident. His personal effects were turned over to his next of kin, a sister in Montana. Tom slumped in his chair, the pieces beginning to fall into place. The uniform fabric I found, it had to be his. But how did it end up in that tree, and who carved those initials? Waters couldn't have carved his own initials if he was... He couldn't finish the sentence. Unless he wasn't dead in 1983, Chief Brennan said quietly. Unless something else happened out there, something we never uncovered during the original investigation. The 3 officials sat in silence, each contemplating the disturbing possibility that David Waters had survived whatever had happened to him in November 1983, only to meet some other fate years later. The evidence suggested that someone with knowledge of Waters' identity had been at that remote location recently. Someone who had taken the time to leave a message in the bark of a tree. "We go back out there tomorrow," Chief Brennan decided. "Full investigation team, crime scene specialists, the works. If David Waters is out there, if he's been out there all these years, we need to find out what happened to him." The next morning dawned clear and cold, with temperatures hovering just above freezing. The investigation team assembled at park headquarters before sunrise. Chief Brennan, Linda Santos, Tom Mitchell, crime scene specialist Agent Rebecca Martinez from the FBI, and Dr. James Thornfield, a forensic anthropologist from the University of Wyoming. Also joining them was retired Chief Ranger William Hayes, who had led the original search for David Waters in 1983. "I've been thinking about this all night," Hayes said, as the team prepared their equipment. "The original search was thorough. We covered every square mile of that region multiple times. If Waters had died from exposure or a wildlife encounter, we should have found some trace of him. The fact that we found nothing at all always bothered me." Agent Martinez adjusted her field pack and checked her camera equipment. "What's the terrain like in the area where the fabric was found?" "Oh, steep, rocky, heavily forested," Tom replied. "Lots of ravines and hidden clearings. If someone wanted to stay hidden out there, they could probably do it, especially if they had wilderness survival skills." When they reached the location where Tom had made his discovery, the team spread out methodically, each member focusing on a specific aspect of the investigation. Agent Martinez photographed everything. The tree with the carved initials, the disturbed ground in the clearing, the arrangement of rocks, and the various tracks and signs of human activity. Dr. Thornfield examined the fabric caught in the tree, carefully removing it for laboratory analysis. "This has been exposed to the elements for some time," he noted, "but probably not 17 years. I'd estimate it's been here for a few months at most, possibly less." The implications were staggering. If the fabric was from David Waters' uniform, and if it had only been in the tree for a few months, then Waters might have been alive, possibly even recently alive, decades after his official disappearance. As the team worked, Linda Santos made a discovery that would shift the entire focus of the investigation. About 100 yards from the main site, hidden beneath a pile of fallen branches and leaves, she found a small cache of items that clearly didn't belong in the wilderness. Several empty cans of food, a rusted camping knife, and most significantly, a water-damaged notebook wrapped in plastic. "Over here," she called, her voice tight with excitement and apprehension. "I've found something." The team gathered around as Santos carefully unwrapped the notebook. The pages were yellowed and stained, but much of the writing was still legible. It appeared to be a journal, with entries dating back several years. Agent Martinez photographed each page before anyone handled the notebook further. As she worked, Dr. Thornfield read the entries aloud, his voice growing more somber with each passage. March 15th, 1987. The snows finally melted enough to reach the cache. Found everything still dry. Winter was harder this year. Nearly didn't make it. June 2nd, 1989. Saw hikers on the ridge today. Wanted to call out, but couldn't. Still too dangerous. They wouldn't understand. October 8th, 1991. 8th anniversary coming up. Can't believe it's been this long. Sometimes wonder if anyone still remembers. Sometimes wonder if I remember correctly myself. The entries painted a picture of someone living in complete isolation, struggling to survive in the wilderness while dealing with some kind of threat or trauma that prevented them from seeking help. But the most chilling entry was near the end of the notebook, dated just 3 months earlier. July 18th, 2000. They're back. Found signs near the North Ridge cache. After all these years, they found me again. Time to move deeper. Time to disappear for good. If anyone finds this, look for the radio. The radio has the truth. Chief Brennan looked up from the notebook, his face grim. The radio. What radio? Tom felt his pulse quicken. The backup radio at the ranger station. I checked it yesterday, but I didn't really examine it closely, just made sure it was secure. We need to get back there immediately, Agent Martinez said, already packing her equipment. If there's evidence at the ranger station, we need to secure it before anyone else has a chance to disturb it. When they reached the ranger station, Tom led the team directly to the communications equipment room. The backup radio was exactly where it should be, mounted on a shelf alongside emergency supplies and maintenance equipment. But as Tom examined it more closely, he noticed something he had missed during his routine inspection the day before. The radio's housing had been partially disassembled, with several screws removed and the back panel slightly ajar. Someone had been inside the device recently, and they had left something behind. "Agent Martinez," Tom called, stepping back from the radio. "You need to see this." Martinez approached carefully, photographing the radio from multiple angles before examining it more closely. Using a small screwdriver from her kit, she carefully removed the back panel of the radio. Inside, wedged against the circuit board, was a small cassette tape wrapped in plastic. Attached to the tape was a note written in the same handwriting they had seen in the journal. "Play this. Tell the truth." Due. The team stood in stunned silence, staring at the cassette tape that might hold the answers to David Waters' 17-year disappearance. Whatever was recorded on that tape, it was important enough for Waters to risk exposure by hiding it in the ranger station, a location he knew would eventually be discovered by other Park Service personnel. "We need to get this back to headquarters immediately," Chief Brennan said, "and we need to contact FBI headquarters about this. If Waters was hiding from someone for 17 years, and if that someone is still active, this could be much bigger than a missing person case." Back at headquarters, the team gathered in Chief Brennan's office, where an old cassette player had been connected to the conference room's speaker system. The tape was carefully inserted, and after a moment of static, the voice of David Waters began to speak. "My name is David Eugene Waters. If you're hearing this, then something has happened to me, and I'm probably dead. I'm recording this in September of 2000, 17 years after I was supposed to have died in these mountains. I want people to know the truth about what happened, about why I've been hiding all these years, and about the people who turned Yellowstone into their personal playground for activities that no one should ever know about." Waters' voice was strained, aged by years of hardship and stress, but his words were clear and deliberate. The team listened in growing horror as he began to describe events that had been hidden in the wilderness for nearly 2 decades. On November 12, 1983, I was conducting my usual patrol of the Thorofare region. It was supposed to be routine, check the trails, assess winter preparations, document wildlife activity. But what I found wasn't in any of the reports I was supposed to file. I stumbled onto something that was never supposed to be discovered, something that cost me my life, even though I'm still breathing. The tape crackled with static for a moment before Waters continued. I found a camp, hidden deep in the backcountry, far from any established trail. At first I thought it might be poachers or illegal hunters. We'd had problems with that before. But as I got closer, I realized it was something much worse. There were men there, well-dressed men who clearly weren't wilderness enthusiasts. They had expensive equipment, military-grade communications gear, and they were conducting some kind of meeting. Agent Martinez leaned forward, her training in organized crime investigations immediately recognizing the pattern Waters was describing. This wasn't just about wilderness survival. This was about criminal activity at the highest levels. I should have backed away immediately, Waters continued, his voice heavy with regret. But I heard names, important names, people in government and business that I recognized from the news. They were talking about money, lots of money, and about using park service resources and protected lands for activities that would have destroyed everything we were supposed to be protecting. The cassette player hummed quietly as Waters paused, apparently gathering his thoughts. When he resumed speaking, his voice was barely above a whisper, as if he were afraid of being overheard even in the wilderness. They saw me. As the cassette tape continued to play in the dim conference room, David Waters' voice grew more urgent, more desperate. The weight of 17 years spent hiding in the wilderness was evident in every word he spoke. They saw me. I tried to get away. Tried to reach my radio to call for backup, but they had people positioned around the perimeter of their camp. Professional people, military types. They caught me before I could call for help, before I could warn anyone about what was happening. Chief Brennan felt his blood run cold. This was exactly the kind of high-level corruption that could destroy careers and lives, the kind of secret that people would kill to protect. If Waters was telling the truth, his disappearance hadn't been an accident or a wildlife encounter. It had been a deliberate silencing. They told me I had two choices, Waters continued. I could disappear permanently, dead or alive, and never be heard from again. Or I could become a problem that they would solve in their own way, which would probably involve my body being found eventually, but not in any condition that would suggest anything other than an unfortunate wilderness accident. The implications were staggering. David Waters had been forced to fake his own death to save his life, condemned to live as a ghost in the wilderness, while a massive search operation looked for his body. For 17 years, he had survived in one of the most challenging environments in North America, all to avoid the people who wanted him dead. I chose to disappear, Waters said. I had enough wilderness survival training to know it was possible, at least for a while. I thought maybe I could outlast them, wait until the political climate changed, or until the people involved moved on to other things. I never imagined I'd still be hiding 17 years later. The tape continued with Waters describing his years of survival in the Yellowstone backcountry, moving from cache to cache, avoiding all human contact, living off the land and supplies he had managed to steal or salvage over the years. He described winters that nearly killed him, summers spent constantly watching for signs that his pursuers had found his trail, and the slow psychological deterioration that came from complete isolation. The worst part, he said, wasn't the cold or the hunger or the constant fear. It was knowing that people thought I was dead, that my family grieved for me, that my friends and colleagues moved on with their lives while I was trapped out here like an animal. I wanted to contact them so many times, wanted to let them know I was alive, but I knew that would be signing their death warrants too. Agent Martinez recognized the classic pattern of witness protection gone wrong, except in this case, Waters had been forced to protect himself without any official support or resources. He had become his own witness protection program, using the wilderness as his shield against people who had the power and connections to eliminate problems quietly and efficiently. The recording continued, with Waters describing specific details about the people he had seen at the illegal camp in 1983. Names, dates, descriptions of activities that clearly involved the use of national park resources for private gain. As the team listened, it became clear that Waters had witnessed something that could bring down high-ranking officials in both government and private industry. In July of this year, Waters said, his voice becoming more urgent, I found signs that they're active again. New camps, new activities, and evidence that they're looking for me specifically. After all these years, they still consider me a threat. They've never stopped hunting me, and now I think they're getting close. The tape crackled ominously, and when Waters spoke again, his voice was filled with resignation and determination. I'm making this recording because I know my time is running out. If they find me, if something happens to me, I want the truth to be known. I've hidden evidence in multiple locations throughout the park, documentation that proves what I witnessed in 1983 and what I've observed over the years since then. Waters went on to describe a complex system of hidden caches scattered throughout the Yellowstone backcountry, each containing documents, photographs, and other evidence of the criminal activities he had witnessed. The locations were marked using a combination of GPS coordinates and traditional wilderness navigation techniques, hidden in locations that would be accessible to Park Service personnel, but nearly impossible for outsiders to find. The most important cache is at Shoshone Point, marked by 3 stacked stones in a triangle pattern. Inside, you'll find photographs, documents, and recordings that prove everything I've told you. Use this evidence carefully. The people involved have killed to protect their secrets, and they won't hesitate to kill again. As the tape neared its end, Waters' voice became increasingly emotional, the strain of 17 years in hiding finally breaking through his carefully maintained composure. To my sister, Rebecca, if she's still alive, I want her to know that I thought about her every day. I'm sorry I couldn't come home. Sorry I couldn't be there for her and her children. To my colleagues in the Park Service, I'm sorry I couldn't trust you with the truth earlier. I was afraid that involving you would put you in danger too. The tape ended with Waters providing detailed instructions for accessing the evidence caches and a final plea for justice. Don't let them win. Don't let them continue to use our national parks for their personal gain while destroying everything we've sworn to protect. The truth is out there, hidden in the wilderness. Find it, expose it, and make sure that David Waters didn't disappear for nothing. The conference room fell silent as the tape clicked off, leaving the investigation team to process the magnitude of what they had just heard. This was no longer a missing person case or even a simple criminal investigation. This was a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government and industry, one that had already claimed at least one life and would likely claim more if the truth ever came to light. But even as they prepared to uncover the evidence that David Waters had died to protect, none of them realized that their investigation had already been discovered. In the shadows of power, phone calls were being made, orders were being given, and the same forces that had silenced David Waters 17 years earlier were already moving to ensure that his final testimony would never see the light of day. The hunt for the truth was about to become a race for survival, and the pristine wilderness of Yellowstone was about to become a battlefield where justice and corruption would clash in a final, desperate confrontation.